Hello again, BookTube, it's Sean here, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to go with that old adage of BookTube that if you don't have anything meaningful to upload, then record a tag video. And as my channel is still pretty much in its infancy and there's only a couple of videos on it anyway, it seems appropriate at this juncture to record the BookTube Newbie Tag. I do plan on uploading my August wrap-up at some stage soon. Well, I guess technically speaking it would be more accurate to call it an end of summer wrap-up, because I do want to include the last week of July in that video, largely because that was the week of Booktubeathon, and because I have been very lazy and disorganised in the last month, I never got round to recording a formal wrap-up of Booktubeathon. Although that does mean there are a large number of books to cover in that wrap-up video. I may need to split it into two, but I guess we'll see when I get round to recording that. So I want to cover the BookTube Newbie Tag. I know that there are a couple of variants of this tag. Michael S. Deutsch in the last few months has unleashed on the unsuspecting BookTube community the BookTube Newbie 2.0 tag, which is his kind of reimagining of the BookTube Newbie Tag with perhaps more relevant and up-to-date questions. But call me an old stick-in-the-mud reactionary, I'm going to go with the original tag, but with some deference to Michael. I am going to include what I thought was the most interesting question from his 2.0 tag in the questions as a kind of bonus question at the end, so don't get too excited there. And I think this therefore probably makes this something like the BookTube Newbie 1.1 tag or something like that. So I've got the questions here on my trusty tablet, and let's get straight into the questions. Question 1, why did you start this channel? Well, I guess as a gentleman of a certain age, with a face, it has been said before, is more appropriate to radio, and very low consumption of YA and no flashy edits in my videos, it's probably safe to say I wasn't doing this for the subscriber count or the view count. Like a lot of people, I think there are a lot of sort of generic sounding answers to this question, but I think that's because a lot of people set up BookTube channels for the same reason, and that's to have a conversation with other people that are passionate about books and passionate about the same books that you are. And I think that's the same for me. It may be a boring answer, but it's the honest answer. I think the interesting distinction may be between or the question of why set up a channel rather than just watching BookTube videos and commenting. And for me, selfishly, that comes down onto me being able to talk about the books that I'm interested in. You don't always get that when you're just watching videos, as I was doing, and I suspect a lot of booktubers do before they set up their channel. You don't always get that when you're just watching other people's videos. You're dependent on the books that they're reading, and sometimes that's going to spark your interest and other times it's not. So from a selfish perspective, having my own channel means I can talk about the books that I'm interested and passionate about. So that was it for question 1. Question 2, what are some of the fun and unique things that you can bring to BookTube? Well, I don't think fun and unique are normally words that are associated with me or this channel. I guess on the unique side, probably, given I read a lot of non-fiction, and although I kind of know that that is an area that is getting more kind of bandwidth on BookTube, it's still an area I believe is largely underrepresented. So from the unique side, I think maybe talking about books that don't get a lot of coverage, if any, elsewhere on BookTube would be one thing. And the other thing, and this comes to mind because of something that Steve Partridge did on his channel. If you don't follow him, I will link his video down below, and you should go and subscribe to him. He had a naming ceremony for his channel's mascot a few videos back, and I think that's why this channel probably hasn't broken through into thousands of subscribers, sponsorship deals coming out of my ears, that kind of thing, because it doesn't have a channel mascot. And I think we should start a movement for more channel mascots on BookTube. So that would be the answer to question 2. Question 3, what are you most excited about for this new channel? Well, again, I don't think you're going to see much in the way of excitement here. It's going to be kept very British and very low-key. So I guess probably the most, well, what may be approaching excitement would be about the discussion with other people. And I can see why Michael S. Deutsch now redrafted the questions for his 2.0 tag, because you end up repeating yourself. But maybe in the comments section for some of my videos, we could have, within the boundaries and parameters of acceptable booktube etiquette, the odd disagreement about a book, because I'm more interested in dissenting views actually in the comments section. Maybe people that have taken something different from a book or have a different perspective than what I've seen. So I think that's more interesting in terms of the conversation you can have in the comments section. If it's just a load of people affirming my opinion, then it's less useful. So not necessarily excited about that, I wouldn't say, but that's probably the closest thing that you're going to get in terms of approaching excitement for my channel. So question 4, why do you love reading? Well, I guess I mentioned I read a lot of non-fiction, so I have a fairly eclectic mix, I guess, of books, 50% non-fiction maybe in most months. And for non-fiction, I love reading because it teaches me stuff, and I still like learning. And I read a lot of history. That gives you can look for parallels in history books around what is happening in today's world, and it gives you some kind of insight in how we should be perhaps navigating modern day problems. For fiction, a lot of it, particularly since I was kind of brought into fiction by reading fantasy books, a lot of that is about escapism, but also about having an appreciation for different perspectives, being able to see the world through somebody else's eyes, and having appreciation for different experiences that you wouldn't necessarily get to experience in your own life. So that's question 4. Question 5, what book or book series got you into reading? That's an interesting question. I think the first book that I remember actually loving, and I remember getting this for Christmas one year when I was maybe 6 or 7, was actually not a book that you read necessarily, but it was an atlas, and I remember flicking through this atlas many times and sort of imagining adventures in different parts of the world. I remember that it had sort of the continent maps at the front and a map of all the different kind of environments across the world, so you could see where all the tropical rainforests were and all that kind of stuff. So that was the first probably book that got me sort of in love with physical books, but not necessarily reading as such. The first books after that I remember having, and my father has always been into ornithology, bird watching, so I had a lot of bird identification books and a lot of sort of natural world books identifying different sort of species, so trees, butterflies, those kind of things, plants. And then the first sort of fiction books that I got into, maybe when I was sort of 10, 11, were more or less exclusively fantasy. So this was things like the Dragonlance series, David Eddings series, Shannara series by Terry Brooks, Tolkien of course, a lot of the early kind of Pratchett Discworld novels as well. So those were kind of my mainstays, and I did have a book, in fact I've just picked up another copy of it recently and plan to read it, because this is David Gemmell's Legend. This is a book that I must have read pretty much every year between the ages of kind of maybe 12 and when I went to university at 18. So I'm going to reread that again, because it's probably the first time. I bought it a couple of weeks back, and it's the first time I kind of picked it up in over 2 decades probably. So I'm going to look forward to getting around to reading that again. So those were the kind of books that I read until I was maybe 18, 19. Then of course I went to university, discovered alcohol, and my reading went off a cliff for about a decade. So there you go. Question 6, what question would you ask your favourite booktuber? Well, this probably, it's a question and a kind of pleading request, and this goes for many of my favourite booktubers, and that would be, do you realise what you're doing to my TBR, and please, please, please stop it, because since I've started watching BookTube, there are so many good recommendations out there. It's difficult to stop your TBR and your book buying growing quite alarmingly. So that would be one. Second question, I'm not going to say who this is for, but you may be able to figure out who it is for, and that would be the jingle you have on your channel. Can you please release that as a full-length single, because it gets stuck in my head every time I go and watch videos on your channel. And the final one, and if you can guess which booktuber this is for, then I would be very impressed. Why did your parents buy you that for your birthday? So probably a little bit more of an obscure one, but see if anybody gets that. Question 7. What challenges do you think starting a booktube channel will be hardest to overcome? Well, maybe the main two are already kind of apparent. First is getting used to talking to a camera, getting comfortable talking to a camera. I mentioned this in previous videos, and I'm sure a lot of booktubers have this problem when they first sort of set up their channels, of actually getting used to it. And I've watched back obviously my first 2 attempts at videos, and it's kind of painful and cringy to watch, but hopefully given a little bit of practice I will slowly start to get better. And the second, again, this has been quite obvious on my channel, is around a regular upload schedule. And you know, I've got no excuse for this. I know that there are other booktubers who lead very busy lives and still manage to keep up a solid routine of uploading, so I just need to get into that regular regime of filming videos. But some of the time I don't film videos because I'm reading, so I think that's a fairly valid excuse for a booktuber. But obviously my channel is not going to grow if I don't put up regular content, so need to get used to that. And here's the extra bonus question from Michael S. Deutsch's 2.0 tag video, and that is, what genres would you like to see talked about more on BookTube? So I think if you were to draw a pie chart, at least on the consumption of videos on BookTube, you would probably have a big slice, at least this is my perception anyway, that about 50% or something like that would be YA. And then you would have some smaller slices around kind of literary fiction and new releases, and then a similar kind of slice, I would guess, on sci-fi and fantasy, and then a relatively small slice for other. And this is kind of my personal preferences, I guess, around what I would like to see expanded in that other segment. And these are, as I say, this is my personal view. It's maybe not the types of books that everybody else wants to see, but from my personal perspective, I would like to see more non-fiction generally, but specifically within non-fiction, I would like to see more history books talked about and reviewed, and more political commentary and political biographies, and finally more natural history. And perhaps on the fiction side of that equation, perhaps more historical fiction. I don't know many channels that have historical fiction as their kind of main genre, in the sense that you get, for example, fantasy and sci-fi specific channels. So although I think it's worth mentioning, and I will link this down in the section below, that one of the channels that I follow, called Reading with Robyn, has just launched in the last few weeks a Goodreads group called Blast from the Past, which is specifically historical fiction. And if you like historical fiction, I will link all the details down below, and it should be something that you check out, because I think it's going to be good, and certainly I'm going to try and get involved when I can in those monthly book choices. So that's it from me. That's the BookTube Newbie Tag. Thanks for watching. If you like this video and want to see further videos from me, please subscribe. And thanks for your time, BookTube, and I will speak to you in the next video. Thank you.